All right, in this second video, we're going to continue with our page layout in InDesign 2018. Make sure at this point that you download the files that you need and extract them. We have an assets folder. You'll see it in the description. And I've got a bunch of assets already prepared for you that we're going to use. So you want to extract those, and you want to have those in a subfolder of another folder. And the next thing that you want to do is save your document that you've been working on into that folder. So do File, Save As, navigate to that folder, and then I've called it the ID Mag Layout Toot JRAW, so I'll put my name on it, Part 1. I'm just putting the Part 1 so that I know that this is the end of Part 1, and I'll be saving new files for each step, but you can go ahead and use the same file throughout. Now, we want to start populating our first page of our article, and that's going to have a big background image and some text and stuff on it. The article that we're using is called The Secret Life of Symbols. Found this years ago. I think it's a great article, and also I have the book, which I think is just amazing, and you'll see a picture of that book here in just a moment, and that's this one, and that is Decoding Design by the same person. And it's just a really great article, so I think you should definitely read it, about how people use symbols and how icons have been designed and how symbols go into design for graphic designs, should I say. And then also they talk about the IBM, and they talk about Fibonacci sequence, and they talk about Apple. And so there's some tie-in with the technology as well. Great article, definitely read it, but we're also going to design with it, which I think is cool. Now, the text that I'm going to use here is The Secret Life of Symbols, so I'll use that in a minute, but I'm going to go ahead and pull in a background first. Now, we can certainly just find the images that we want, and we can click and drag them straight into InDesign, but that's not so fun because we don't know exactly what's going on with those images. So I'm going to go back until I can see the folder, and I want you to right-click on that folder, and if you have Adobe Bridge installed, then you should be able to browse with it. And I really like this method. And the reason why is because now, of course, I can zoom up, see my objects a little bit bigger. But if I click on one of them, it will show me the details about this object over on the right. I'm going to go ahead and pull this up. Come on. Oh, that's not really what I wanted. There we go. So I could see a preview of it if I wanted, but here's what I'm really looking for. That tells me what the pixel dimensions are, and then the dimensions in inches, and the resolution. And here's what's really important. Take a look at these books. This one is 500 by 500, but it's 6.9 inches by 6.9 at 72. And this one is the same dimensions of 500 pixels by 500 pixels, but it's only 3.3 inches by 150 pixels per inch. And so what's really important when it comes to how this document will work in InDesign is that it uses the inches, dimensions, and resolution when you import it. And that's very important to remember. Looking back at the graphic we're going to bring in, this one is 11 inches by 11 inches at 150 pixels per inch. So to bring it into InDesign, just click and drag, hover down to InDesign, come back up, and then you can let go. Now, as soon as we get this floating image, and this is where we're ready to place that image, you can click and drag, and you can click and drag using the Shift key too to make sure that you place it in a constrained way, and it will place the image, but then you're scaling the image as you place it. I always recommend that you just click once, and that brings in the image according to the size that you have told it to be. Now, just playing with this image real quick, I'm gonna change the size of my frame, and you'll immediately see one of the big problems of using InDesign, and that is the frame and the image are two separate objects. To really illustrate this, I'm going to go to my swatches and change the background of my graphic so it's something really obnoxious. And you'll see if I move around this frame, the image is not moving with it. The image is inside the frame. And you get to the middle of the frame and you'll see a little hand tool, and you can move around the image, and you'll even see a little red selection of that image temporarily. But if you double click, you can then move around the image inside that frame, and you can even scale down the image if you hold the shift key or whatever else. Even if you distort the image, it's okay for right now because we're going to fix all of that when we place this image for real. So just be mindful that these are two separate elements. The image and the frame are two separate pieces. And that goes the same with frames and text and frames and anything else. And so just very important to notice that. Now we're going to move up to the top of our document. Hold down the space bar and you can get to the hand tool, and I want to make that go all the way up to the top. And as I'm scaling out this thing, I'm going to scale it down to the bottom. But before I do that, there's a button here that I really want you to know about. Really, really helpful. And that is these fill frame proportionally. That one, what it does is it fills it to the height or width, depending upon which one is larger. And then it just fixes your image and places it right in the center and crops off the top or bottom automatically for you. This one does it proportionally. So it takes it and it uses the smallest dimension versus the largest dimension. So I pretty much always use the first one. But you can also click Auto Fit, which applies that fill frame proportionally automatically anytime you resize your frame. And I think that's really helpful as you're trying to place elements like background graphics. Now that I've placed that, you can double click, get inside of that image, and then you can nudge with your shift and left and right arrows, or just the left and right arrows by themselves, if you need to adjust the placement of that image. Now, click outside of the image to close what you were doing there, and be mindful of the fact that I am making sure that this image does go all the way across my page border, all the way to the bleed. The next thing that I want to do is go up to my layers, and I want to lock this layer. So if you double click on it, we'll call it our background. I'll even call it the cover BG. And we can lock it right now and then click OK. We can also just click on the layer at any time and lock it. This way I can't accidentally select it and move it, which will be really important as I'm placing other graphics on top. Let's create a new layer, and I'm going to call this my cover. And now let's start placing some graphics. Going back to Bridge, I want to bring in the two books here, the books of icons and the decoding design image. If you select both, then click and drag down, drag back up and click, you'll notice that both were loaded in and brought in at the same time. But notice how much bigger this one is again. If you remember, this one is 72 pixels per inch, that one is 150, and even 150 is only half the size it really should be for doing page layout or for print. It really should be 300 pixels per inch, but we're keeping it smaller to save file size. Anyway, this image is not as big. It's much bigger than I want it to be, and actually I want it to be even a lot smaller. So I'm going to place this image first, and I know it's going to kind of go into that corner right there, and then I'm going to have this come up to meet. So if I zoom in a little bit, I'm going to have that go up to meet that line. And the problem is if I just start zooming, or if I just start moving it up, it's going to crop that image, and I don't want to do that. I want to make sure that I get the whole image. So holding down the Control key as you use the Shift key is a great way of scaling the frame and the contents in that frame at the same time. And I use that quite a lot. The other thing that we could do is click on the auto fit as well for the next object. And then as you scale the object with just the Shift key held down, it's going to also scale, doing basically the same thing. So let me get this set. I'm getting that back up into that corner, and then I'm going to scale it down until it fits one of those lines. So that's basically my first little tiny bit. I think I'm going to drop it one square. There we go. I want to be down. Nope. I want to be one up in the middle. So I'm going up to there. It's kind of in the middle of the design because I still have a graphic and a heading at the top and another bit of text over here on the right. In fact, I'm taking that up one more is where it is supposed to go. Let me make sure that that's correct. Sometimes it can be a little bit fiddly getting into place, but I think that's where I wanted it to be. And now I can scale that back so it meets that line. It's just a little bit smaller. I think that's the design I had planned. All right, now we're going to place the other graphic, and that's going to be this golden ratio white Illustrator file. I'll place it in here. Just click to place the file, and you'll see it has come in. Now, I'm going to move it over to basically where it goes. It kind of fits over there beside in the crook between those two images. And as you zoom in with the Alt and the mouse wheel, you'll notice you get up close and it really doesn't look that good. And the problem is that this is just a preview of what your image is. InDesign tries to make it easier to see your images or work quickly with your images by reducing the resolution and showing you just a preview. But if you go to View, Display Performance, High Quality Display, you'll see that this looks a lot better. Now I'm going to move this into the right position. So as you click and drag, here's a problem. You'll notice that I can't see where I'm moving this object to. So a little trick to know is if you zoom in, I'm going to get to where that gets placed, and I knew that was a little bit off. I'm going to hold it down and click, and just don't move the mouse for a second, and then start to move the mouse. And you'll see it actually allows us to get much more accurate. So I've got that in there, but now I want to move this to the back. There's a couple ways to do that. You can go up to your layers, and this is the top layer. I can drag that underneath, or if you know the keyboard shortcuts, you can go to Arrange and you can send it to the front, or you can send it to the back with your Control, Shift, and left and right brackets, which is what I usually do. Now I can click on that graphic and move it back up and move that one up where it actually should be. There we go. I think that's right. Now I'm going to move that just slightly. This is not easy to do sometimes, but I think that's close enough for government work. All right, so I've placed my graphic in there. You'll notice that it extends way beyond. So make sure you don't click on Auto Fit so that you can then crop off the left-hand side of that and bring it back to your bleed area. Now, the next thing that we need to do is start laying in our text. So I'm going to go to my article again, The Secret Life of Symbols, and I'm going to copy that text in here. Just copy it, go to InDesign, and hit paste, and you'll see that text magically appears. It just creates the frame for you, but it doesn't look that good. So here's one of the things to be aware of. When I look up at the top at my stroke and fill settings, you'll notice there's a little arrow next to it, and we can bring this up, and that's very important to know about. The reason why is because I've got two icons here. One is the frame, and the other one is the text. It can look inside that frame and notice that there is text there, and allow me to actually change the settings for the text instead of the settings of the frame itself. And now I can change that text to white, and so I can see it a lot better. Now the next thing that we want to do is change it to another font, and you'll notice that I can't change the font up here, and so that's why sometimes it's great to have those character settings over on your right hand side, because without going into the text, I can then go ahead and choose a different font. The font that I've already used was the Trajan. Should show up. Let me go to all classes, and there's the Trajan Pro Bold. You could use the regular one or the Trajan Pro 3, doesn't really matter. And the next thing I'm going to do is just make this get a little bit bigger. So let's take it up to like 36 to start off with. Now, anytime you have large text, I think that text should be a little bit tighter in kerning. So if you know the keyboard shortcut, you can do that when you're inside the text. Or since we have this right here, we can go ahead and bring it in with our tracking options right there. And let's say taking it in about that looks pretty good. Then I'm going to separate these between some different lines. I want the secret life of, and then symbols to be bigger. And so we can do this all in one frame if we want, or we could separate this stuff to different frames. If I want to take the out and then put that into a new frame, all I have to do is select the text with the type tool, go outside of it so I'm no longer in that text anymore, and hit paste, and it will create the new frame for the text with the setting that I just did. Now, another helpful tool I like to use at this point is this one right up here on the top called Fit Frame to Content. It allows the frame to fit to the content, which just makes it easier to move things around. Now I can get rid of any extra space that I have in my other frame, and then I'm going to select symbols and make this a lot larger. Looks like about 60 points is what I was looking for. However, I do need to adjust the height. Now, notice that since I'm inside the text, I get all of the character and paragraph settings here at the top, but I still have the flyout menu, so it doesn't matter if you change your leading up here or you do it on the right hand side. By changing the leading, we can get that text closer to the text above, and then we can unselect or get out of the text with a black arrow and fit the frame to it, and maybe sometimes you have to pull that in too. With multiple line text, sometimes you have to do that. Anyway, I'd really like to see what this looks like without all this junk everywhere. And so I'm going to go into what's called the preview mode, and we can go to it right here on the left-hand side, or you can press W at any time as long as you're not editing text. And now you can see that I can adjust the spacing of just a little bit. I think that looks a little bit better. In fact, I might even take that so it has like the space that we have here, not using the space of that S. I think that looks a little bit better. So there's my title, and I'm going to actually group the two together by selecting both. And look at layers real quick when I do this. You'll see here's the two layers, The and Secret Life of Symbols. When I group them, you'll see they've now become a new group. And now you can see a dotted line around them as well. Now, the reason that I grouped them was because I'd really like to scale them up a little bit, and I wanted to see what size they currently were, and I want them to scale together. And so this is a little trick that I like, which is you select both, you put them into a group, get them over there to the left-hand side, and then holding down the Shift and the Control key together, or the Option key, I guess, on the Mac, I should know. Now I can scale both, and I get both scaling together, and that's just a lot easier. And I think that's about it. I'm not too concerned. Maybe I'll get that to come out to about the same width as my text. That's going to be a little bit harder to get fiddly with. There we go. It actually did show me that, and now that's aligned with the text, which I think is really nice when you have things that align well together. I'm also going to bring this down just to get that other line to go over the top. I think that looks just a little bit better. And it brings down my text in the design a little bit as well. And then the other thing that we need to do is bring in some of the other text. So we have by Maggie McNabb. That's the one who's the byline for this article. So I'll paste her in, go up to my settings, click on type, change it to white, and then maybe make that fit, and then move this somewhere that I think is going to be good in my design. So I'm going to put it here. I'll put it underneath the text there. And, you know, there are lots of places you could make this work, but the byline should definitely be on the cover page so you know who has done it. Now, the other thing we need to do is bring in our first paragraph. So going back to the article, this is the first paragraph that I'm going to use. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to go into InDesign and paste it. And I know that I want this paragraph to kind of fit over here somewhere in my design. Let me go ahead and see my guides again so I can get that to fit. And I know that I want this text to kind of fit across here, but it needs to have a background to it. So let's first go ahead and make it white text, because I know, oops, I need to click on the type. So undo. Well, I'll just remove that. There we go. Click on the type, choose white. And then I'm going to have to go ahead and do another rectangle, and I'm going to put a black one behind it. And I'm not even going to be worried too much about exactly how that's done. I can flip around these two colors real quick, and then I'm going to arrange this to the back by putting it underneath it. And so we can do it manually by dragging it down, or if you right click, go to arrange, you'll see the keyboard shortcuts. So control bracket works well, or control, you can go all the way to the back. You just have to be careful of what layer you're at. Anyway, this is a perfectly valid way of doing my graphic, where I separate my text from my background graphic and I use that on top of each other. The end result looks fine. But here's the thing. I can't really control exactly where that text goes inside of it, meaning that I don't know if my padding is perfect on all sides. So here's one of the things that InDesign does so well, is it allows you to do graphics and text at the same time, because you've got this frame and you can control the frame settings separately from the text settings. So I'm going to select the frame that the text is in, get rid of that black one, and now change this to a black fill. Now what I can do is stretch that down. Let me turn on my guides. Let's stretch that down so it fits my page. Make that go, oops, make this go over to the left so it hits that guide. And I could take it all the way up, but I'm not really too concerned yet. But now I need to inset that text. Hit W again to hide the guides. To inset the text, you right click on the text frame, go to text frame options, and now I have the ability to inset my spacing. Click on preview so you can see it happen as we make changes. And now that is really cool. This is the type of feature that I love about InDesign, is the ability to be able to mess with text inside the frame and to separate the background layer of the frame or the background color settings from the text inside the frame. It just means that you can do a lot more with one object instead of having to have separate elements everywhere in InDesign. So that's basically what we're going to do. I am going to edit the text inside. I do want to make it just a little bit bigger, so I'll make it 15 point, maybe I'll make it 14 point, and just give it a little bit higher leading. That 19 looks pretty good to me for right now. So that's basically the beginning design of our cover page for this article. It's not perfect, but it's a good start. We could take that up if we wanted to make that fit that design perfectly in that little corner. That totally works as well. And so let's go ahead and make those changes and then save your document. Make sure, once again, you're saving it in the same folder that you have. I'm calling mine part 2, but you can just save the same name. And now we're going to go on with the next tutorial and start to bring in some of our other text.